Joining me now is someone who has some firsthand experience dealing with Iran. He's also the only American to negotiate with members of the Iranian intelligence community. Brett McGurk is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Iran, and he's worked essentially for the last three presidents in some form or another, or at least in their administrations. Ambassador McGurk, good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Chuck.
Let me start with what your expertise. Is it, while it's always possible it wasn't the Iranians, what's your sense of how likely it was Iran that was behind the attack on Saudi Arabia?
Look, I think we can all stipulate 100% this is Iran. I mean, there's nobody else with the capability or the motivation. So if that question, I think, is really answered. The question is where the attack came from, what the motivation was. But 17 cruise missiles, drones, this was clearly an Iranian-backed attack, at least.
If they used cruise missiles, are you surprised that we don't know where it came from yet? Or do you think we already know, we just haven't said publicly?
Well, I think the sophistication of this attack is surprising. I mean, we recently moved additional U.S. assets into the region in order to restore deterrence. That was the purpose. We put in additional Patriot batteries into Saudi Arabia. And apparently we didn't have much intelligence that this attack was coming. So I think a lot of homework, I'm sure, is being done behind the scenes, the type of stuff I would have been involved in my previous capacities about, what exactly happened here. Something clearly went wrong. Why was it not detected? And I am hopeful that the administration will be able to release as much as they possibly can publicly so the world can see exactly what happened. So all that work right now is going on.
Saudi Arabia and Iran are in a proxy war, a hot war in Yemen. Should they be surprised that this happened on their soil? Is this a surprise that Iran is escalating the proxy war this way? Or was this a sadly natural thing that was going to happen, considering how long this Yemeni civil war, really proxy war between the Iranians and the Saudis is taking?
I think, Chuck, the scale and sophistication of this attack is a surprise, but it's not a surprise that the Iranians are trying to frustrate the flow of oil out of the Gulf, because they said they were going to do this. I mean, sometimes you got to listen to what the Iranians say. They said that if the U.S. policy is to take their oil exports down to zero, which is the stated declared U.S. policy, and we're trying to do that, they will make it difficult for anyone to export oil. And so we had attacks on tankers docked outside the UAE about 2 months ago. And interestingly, the UAE still to this day has not said, they have not fingered Iran for that attack. Obviously, we had our drone shot down and this attack here. So this is a reaction to the U.S. Economic strangulation policy. I mean, just my analysis, that's what's happening.
Right.
Iran has made the decision. And I thought Matthew had it pretty well analyzed. I think Trump is a bit of a prisoner of his own policy. Trump wanted, hey, we're going to put economic sanctions on Iran, get out of that bad Obama deal, get back to the table, negotiate a better deal. I think Iran has made the decision that we will meet your maximum pressure with pressure of our own, and we will not come back to the table. So I think this will keep happening. We seem to be in a bit of a slow roll now about how to respond. I think everyone's taking a deep breath. I think that's probably pretty good. But 2 months from now, we'll have another crisis, because Iran has made a strategic decision to meet pressure with pressure of their own.
What would realistic military action look like?
Look, it's complicated. I've heard a lot of talk in Washington on commentators that we can do a proportionate, limited strike and control the escalation. That's always the hope, and I think you try to prepare it that way. But I think we would have to plan for an escalation from Iran in which we would then have to respond. So I think it actually is a pretty slippery slope. I think we have to be pretty careful. Look, the Saudis do have some capabilities. I worked with Saudi Arabia early in the counter-ISIS campaign.
It's funny you bring that up. Let me stop you there. There are a lot of comments around my own editorial table going, all these arms that the U.S. sells to Saudi Arabia, why is it that they always still want the Americans to use their weapons first?
Well, Bob Gates famously said in his meetings with the Saudis, it was his analysis, the Saudis want to fight the Iranians down to the last American. But this is a case in which we could actually help the Saudis. The Saudis do have capability to hit fixed targets. I worked with them early in the counter-ISIS campaign. They flew in our formations. They actually did fairly well. What they don't do well is in a conflict like Yemen, where it's called dynamic targeting, trying to hit moving targets on the ground. That's been a real disaster. So we could work with the Saudis to do a proportionate, limited strike in response to this. The question then is what what happens after that. And that is when you really are into the unknown. Again, my analysis of Iranian decision-making here, given just the brazen nature of this attack, I think they have probably priced in a response, and they have already kind of locked and loaded their counter. And then the onus would be back on President Trump. Again, Trump is kind of in a corner here, and he's a prisoner of the policy. I don't think this is what he anticipated where this would lead, but this is going to keep happening. We're going to have crisis after crisis so long as the policy is just to strangle Iran's economy.
There's a report this afternoon from about a conversation, sort of a lunchtime conversation, the now former National Security Advisor John Bolton had with some donor. It was sort of a closed lunch. They actually echo what Lindsey Graham said in his tweet, which is the decision not to respond on the drone, on what the Iranians did with the American drone. The Saudi attack wouldn't have happened had the Americans responded then militarily. Do you buy that?
That is total speculation, and I suspect had we responded to that drone, we would have seen this attack probably sooner. Again, I think the Iranians have already thought through the escalatory ladder. That's what you call it in these types of debates. I think they have thought through, if we strike, what will they do next? And so, therefore, if we get into this, we need to be prepared, and the president would need to be prepared for a multi-month campaign. I mean, this is serious business here. And, you know, our allies in the Middle East, they're very exposed. And I think an important indicator, again, is the UAE. We had tankers attacked off the coast of the UAE, clearly Iran, and they still have not said Iran was responsible because they are on the front lines of this policy. And so the Iranians will come after them. So everybody is pretty nervous. That's why I think everybody's trying to take a deep breath here and,
who's the de-escalator?
And think through some things.
Who's the the King Hussein of Jordan at times can play that role in the Middle East. There was a time that Mubarak might have played that role. I don't think perhaps Sisi will. Who is going to be the person that tries to play that role that's in the Middle East right now?
Well, first, what's so ironic here, right now the de-escalator is President Trump. I mean, it's kind of amazing to watch, just watching him walk this back. Look, but in the region right now, the Kuwaitis they do not want to see a conflict. The Kuwaitis will be working behind the scenes. The Omanis will be working behind the scenes. Again, I know the UAE right on the front lines there. They do not want to see a conflict really significantly flare up. So you'll have a lot of kind of talk behind the scenes. But again, I think right now everybody's in a slow roll. We're going to have the UN General Assembly. The UN investigators are going to Saudi Arabia. There's going to be a lot of diplomacy. I think the best thing to do is show the evidence to the world. Here's what happened. Try to build some allies and support, and then work up some potential options. But again, the point is the policy is leading to these crises. 2 months ago, it was the drone. We're cocked and loaded. Now it's this attack. We're locked and loaded. 2 months from now, it might be a nuclear crisis or something else.
Sounds like you don't think this policy is working.
I think it is putting the president deep in a corner. And so I think he has to ask some questions. Is this really where I want to go?
Brett McGurk, like I said, who's been on the front lines of this, whether it was at the State Department as a special envoy and dealing with ISIS, dealing with Iraq, I feel like the Middle East and you have spent a lot of time together. Thanks for coming on and sharing your
complex out there. Thanks,
Yes,
John.
it is. Thanks for coming on and sharing. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.